Did you know that Texas, one of the richest and most powerful states in America, now has over 27,000 people living without shelter on any given night? And that violent crime has surged in cities like Houston, Austin, and Dallas, despite billions being poured into law enforcement? Something doesn't add up. How can a state this big, this wealthy, and this resource-rich continue to lose control of its street? The truth is, the real reasons behind Texas's homelessness and crime crisis go far deeper than politics or police funding. From broken mental health systems to housing shortages, drug epidemics, and failed leadership, the roots of this crisis are more complex and more alarming than most people realize. And what's worse, in 2025, the situation is getting even worse, not better. In this video, we're exposing 10 hidden but powerful reasons why Texas can't seem to get ahead of the crisis, and why every resident, business, and policymaker should be paying attention. Stick with us to the end, because the final few reasons might shock you the most. Number 1, a broken mental health system. You can't talk about Texas's homelessness and crime crisis without starting with one of the most ignored public failures, the mental health system. Despite being the second largest state in the U.S., Texas ranks near the bottom nationally for access to mental health care. In 2025, this gap has only widened. Emergency rooms are overcrowded, psychiatric beds are full, and wait lists for therapy or counseling can stretch for months. For thousands of Texans struggling with depression, schizophrenia, PTSD, or bipolar disorder, there is simply nowhere to turn. This crisis doesn't stay behind closed doors, it spills onto the streets. Many people experiencing homelessness in Texas today are living with untreated or poorly managed mental illnesses. Without access to care, they end up sleeping under bridges, on sidewalks, or in tent encampments. When a mental health episode happens, the first to respond is often not a doctor, it's a police officer. And instead of getting treatment, that person might end up in jail, criminalized simply for being sick. It's a vicious cycle: arrest, release, relapse, repeat. And every time it repeats, it becomes harder for that person to find housing, get a job, or reintegrate into society. What's worse, funding cuts and bureaucratic hurdles have weakened Texas's community support programs, pushing the burden onto nonprofits and local shelters that are already under-resourced. There aren't enough caseworkers, crisis counselors, or rehab beds to meet the growing need. And while the state spends heavily on policing and incarceration, it invests far less in the services that actually prevent crime and homelessness in the first place. If Texas wants real change, it must stop treating mental illness as a criminal issue and start addressing it as a public health emergency. That means funding mental health centers, expanding access to affordable therapy, and training officers in crisis intervention. Until then, the streets will keep filling up, not with criminals, but with people who were failed long before they broke the law. Number 2, the affordable housing collapse. If there's one word that defines the heart of Texas's homelessness crisis in 2025, it's housing. And not just any housing, affordable housing. While luxury apartments and high-end condos continue to rise across cities like Austin, Dallas, and Houston, the reality is that millions of working-class Texans can't afford a place to live. The gap between wages and rent has grown so wide that even full-time workers are ending up on the streets. In some cities, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is over $1,500, but minimum wage hasn't budged in years. What caused this collapse? A mix of rapid population growth, real estate speculation, and zoning policies that favor high-income development. As more people move to Texas, demand for housing skyrockets. Developers respond, but they build for profit, not for people in need. That means fewer affordable units, long wait lists for public housing, and massive displacement in gentrifying neighborhoods. Meanwhile, evictions are rising, rent assistance programs are underfunded, and landlords hold most of the power. The result? Thousands of people living in cars, tents, or couch surfing, even while holding down jobs. This isn't just about homelessness, it's about survival. Families with children, seniors on fixed incomes, and young adults entering the workforce are all being priced out of their communities. And once you lose your home, everything else becomes harder. Finding work, staying healthy, even keeping your kids in school. It's a domino effect that turns a housing problem into a social crisis. If Texas wants to stop the bleeding, it needs bold action. Investing in public housing, offering real rent control, fast-tracking affordable development, and protecting tenants from unfair evictions. Until then, the system will continue to push people out faster than it can lift them up, and the homeless population will keep growing, right in plain sight. Number 3, the rise of drug addiction and fentanyl. One of the darkest and most urgent factors fueling Texas's homelessness and crime crisis in 2025 is the explosive rise of drug addiction, especially involving fentanyl. This powerful synthetic opioid is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, and it's everywhere. Across Texas, emergency responders are dealing with record numbers of overdoses, and morgues in cities like San Antonio and Houston are reporting more drug-related deaths than ever before. The streets have become battlegrounds, not just for police, but for people fighting a daily war with addiction. Fentanyl is different from drugs of the past. It's cheap, easy to mix with other substances, and incredibly deadly even in small amounts. Many users don't even know they're taking it. It's now found in pills, heroin, cocaine, even marijuana. And as addiction grows, so does desperation. People steal, commit petty crimes, or fall into homelessness because their lives are entirely consumed by the need to survive their next high. Jails are filling up with addicts instead of criminals, and the criminal justice system has become a revolving door for those who need treatment, not punishment. What makes this even more tragic is how poorly equipped Texas is to respond. There aren't enough detox beds, rehab centers, or long-term recovery programs. Many counties have no inpatient addiction services at all. And for those who are homeless, getting clean is nearly impossible without stable housing and support. Meanwhile, lawmakers often focus on tougher penalties and harsher enforcement instead of funding what actually works: harm reduction, addiction counseling, and medically assisted treatment. If Texas truly wants to reduce crime and homelessness, it must stop criminalizing addiction and start treating it as the health crisis it is. Because until that shift happens, fentanyl will keep flooding the streets, and thousands more lives will fall through the cracks, one dose at a time. Number 4, inconsistent policing and policy confusion. In Texas, law enforcement is stretched thin, but not just from a lack of officers. One of the most overlooked reasons the state struggles with homelessness and crime is the sheer inconsistency in policing and policy enforcement. Across cities and counties, there's no unified approach. What's legal in Austin may be banned in Fort Worth. One city may focus on rehabilitation, while another aggressively clears homeless encampments without offering shelter alternatives. This confusion doesn't just affect police. It leaves communities, service providers, and vulnerable individuals caught in the middle. For example, some cities have no camping ordinances, which allow law enforcement to dismantle homeless encampments. But when those people are removed, where are they supposed to go? Shelters are full, affordable housing is scarce, and mental health services are underfunded. So they move not into housing but into new neighborhoods, parks, or sidewalks, triggering public backlash and political debate. Meanwhile, police officers are forced into roles they're not trained for. Mental health crisis responders, addiction counselors, or even social workers. It's a system with no clear direction, and the people it's meant to protect suffer the most. Even within state leadership, messaging is divided. Some leaders call for tough-on-crime policies, demanding more arrests, harsher sentences, and zero tolerance. Others promote housing-first strategies, advocating for support systems before enforcement. This lack of alignment creates friction between state and local governments, delays funding, and leaves frontline responders in the dark. The result? A system where no one knows what's working, and no one is truly accountable. Until Texas creates a unified, evidence-based approach to crime and homelessness, these contradictions will continue to worsen the crisis. That means statewide policies that prioritize coordination, consistency, and compassion, not just politics. Because without clear direction, the cycle of confusion, displacement, and desperation will never end. Now that you've seen what's really fueling the crisis in Texas, we want to hear from you. Do you think change is still possible, or are we too far gone? Scroll down and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could start the conversation we all need. And if this video opened your eyes, don't stop here. Check out our last deep dive for more truths the headlines won't tell you. We put hours of research into these videos to bring you real facts with real impact. So please, support our work by hitting subscribe. It's just one click, but it means everything to us. Number 5. Overcrowded and underfunded shelters. If shelters are supposed to be the safety net that catches people before they fall too far, Then in Texas, that net is ripped and overwhelmed. Across the state, homeless shelters are overcrowded, underfunded, and unable to meet growing demand. In cities like Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio, shelters are turning people away every night. Not because they want to, but because there's simply no space left. Families, elderly individuals, and even children are being left out in the heat, the cold, and the chaos of street life. Many of these facilities are run by nonprofits that rely heavily on donations and limited government support. Their budgets are stretched, their staff overworked, and their buildings often outdated. Some have waiting lists just to get a bed for one night. Others operate with strict rules that make it hard for people with mental health challenges, addictions, or criminal records to qualify, leaving the most vulnerable without options. In short, the very system that's supposed to offer temporary refuge is buckling under the pressure of a crisis it was never built to handle. And the problem isn't just about numbers, it's about approach. Texas has not invested in a long-term shelter strategy. Emergency shelters are treated as short-term solutions, but for many people, they become a revolving door. Without supportive services like counseling, job training, addiction recovery, and case management, shelters do little more than provide a place to sleep for one night. The root causes of homelessness remain untouched. And when people cycle back to the streets again and again, it reinforces the false belief that nothing works. For Texas to truly address homelessness, it must stop treating shelters as an afterthought and start treating them as critical infrastructure. That means sustained funding, capacity expansion, better training for staff, and integrated services that help people rebuild, not just survive. Because without a safe place to land, escaping homelessness becomes almost impossible. Number 6, the criminalization of poverty. In many parts of Texas, being poor has practically become a crime. People living on the streets are not just struggling to survive, they're being ticketed, fined, and arrested for things like sleeping in public, panhandling, or even sitting on sidewalks. It's called the criminalization of poverty, and in 2025, it's making Texas's homelessness and crime crisis even worse. Laws meant to clean up city centers end up targeting the most vulnerable, creating a cycle of punishment instead of support. Here's how it plays out. Someone who's homeless gets cited for camping in a park. They can't pay the fine, so a warrant is issued. They're arrested, processed, and held in jail for a few days, maybe even weeks. When they're released, they've lost what little they had, and now have a criminal record that makes it even harder to get housing or a job. The system traps people in poverty, criminalizes survival, and fills jails with people who don't belong there, all while doing nothing to solve the root issue. Worse still, these policies waste valuable public resources. Police officers, courts, and jails are bogged down dealing with poverty-related offenses that shouldn't be part of the criminal justice system at all. Meanwhile, real solutions like affordable housing, job assistance, mental health treatment, and addiction recovery remain underfunded or ignored. The focus on punishment over prevention has become a political talking point rather than an effective strategy. And for every person arrested, there are hundreds more watching, afraid, and losing faith in a system that seems to push them down instead of lifting them up. If Texas wants to reduce homelessness and crime, it must stop treating poverty like a personal failure and start addressing it as a systemic issue. That means changing laws that punish people for being poor and investing in the services that can actually break the cycle. Because until that shift happens, the state will keep spending money on jails and courtrooms, while people sleep just a few feet away on the streets outside. Number 7, wage stagnation and income inequality. It's one of the most frustrating truths of modern Texas. People are working harder than ever, but still can't afford to live. Despite the image of Texas as a booming economy full of opportunity, millions of workers are trapped in a system where wages have barely moved, while the cost of everything, from rent to groceries to gas, keeps climbing. In 2025, wage stagnation and rising income inequality have become silent drivers of both homelessness and low-level crime. For many Texans, even working full-time at minimum wage, $7.25 an hour in some areas, doesn't cover basic living costs. That's less than $16,000 a year before taxes. Compare that to the average rent in cities like Austin or Dallas, which can reach $1,500 or more for a one-bedroom apartment. The math doesn't work. People are forced to work multiple jobs, skip meals, sleep in cars, or rely on shelters just to survive. And when people feel like the system is stacked against them, desperation grows, which often leads to higher crime rates, especially petty theft and survival-driven offenses. The gap between rich and poor is also growing wider. High-income earners and corporations continue to benefit from tax breaks, booming real estate, and investment opportunities, while working-class families fall further behind. There's a growing sense of injustice, a belief that no matter how hard you work, you'll never catch up. That resentment builds tension, breaks communities, and erodes trust in public institutions. It also fuels instability. When basic needs like housing, healthcare, and childcare are out of reach, people are left with impossible choices. To reduce homelessness and prevent crime in Texas, addressing income inequality is non-negotiable. This means raising the minimum wage, offering better job training programs, expanding access to affordable housing, and ensuring that hard work actually leads to stability. Because until working people can afford to live with dignity, no amount of policing or legislation will solve the deeper issues playing out on the streets of Texas. Number 8. Lack of coordination between agencies. One of the biggest reasons Texas can't get a grip on its homelessness and crime crisis in 2025 is surprisingly simple. No one is truly working together. Across the state, government agencies, nonprofits, healthcare providers, and law enforcement all play a role in responding to homelessness, but too often, they're doing it separately. There's no central system, no unified strategy, and very little communication between the groups trying to help. The result? People fall through the cracks, services overlap inefficiently, and resources are wasted. Imagine this. A person struggling with addiction is picked up by police and sent to jail, where they receive detox treatment. After release, they're referred to a nonprofit for housing, but the nonprofit doesn't know their medical history or what support they got in jail. A week later, they're back on the street, and the cycle starts over. Each agency is doing its job, but no one is connecting the dots. Case management systems don't talk to each other, and people are left to navigate a complicated maze of disconnected services while in crisis. This lack of coordination also affects data, funding, and accountability. Without shared records or real-time updates, agencies can't track long-term progress or identify which programs are actually working. Some cities pour millions into outreach and shelters, while neighboring counties slash funding for mental health or addiction services. It's like trying to patch a sinking boat with duct tape, each agency plugging a hole, but no one addressing the bigger problem. The system itself is broken. If Texas wants real change, it must build a centralized, statewide strategy that links housing, healthcare, policing, mental health, addiction treatment, and workforce development. That means creating shared data systems, appointing local coordinators, and breaking down bureaucratic silos. Only then can agencies move from reacting in isolation to solving problems together. Because without coordination, even the best programs will keep failing, not from lack of effort but from lack of unity. Number 9. Political gridlock and partisan battle. Another major reason Texas continues to struggle with homelessness and crime is one that's often hiding in plain sight: political gridlock. Instead of working together to fix a growing crisis, state and local leaders are locked in endless partisan battles, fighting over who's to blame rather than finding solutions. In 2025, this divide has become even more toxic, with red versus blue city-state clashes dominating headlines while real people suffer in the background. For example, major urban centers like Austin, Houston, and Dallas, often led by more progressive city governments, have tried to implement housing-first policies, invest in shelter systems, and decriminalize certain survival behaviors. But these efforts are frequently undermined by state-level laws and political pushback. In some cases, the state government has passed legislation banning local policies it disagrees with, including homelessness ordinances and needle exchange programs. The message is clear: if you don't follow the state's approach, your city gets blocked. This tug-of-war creates creates confusion, inconsistency, and delays in desperately needed action. Meanwhile, politicians use homelessness and crime as talking points for elections rather than public health or economic issues that require long-term planning. One side calls for more policing, the other for more social support, but without collaboration, neither solution works on its own. Policies passed in haste often fail due to lack of infrastructure, and debates drag on while shelters overflow and people continue to die in the streets. For the average Texan, all this political noise translates into inaction, frustration, and a deep sense that no one is really in charge. Solving these crises demands leadership that rises above party lines, leadership that's focused on result, not headline. Until state and local governments stop fighting each other and start co-governing, Texas will remain stuck in this loop of failure. Because homelessness and crime aren't Republican or Democrat problems, they're human problems. And they won't be solved by pointing fingers. They'll be solved by leaders willing to sit at the same table, listen, and act. Number 10. Public apathy and stigma. Perhaps the most painful and difficult factor in Texas's ongoing crisis is one we don't like to talk about: public apathy. While policies, politics, and systems play a massive role, it's the attitudes of everyday people that can either fuel or fix the problem. In 2025, there's a growing culture of us versus them when it comes to the homeless. Many Texans see those living on the streets not as people in crisis, but as criminals, addicts, or lazy individuals who simply don't want to work. This stigma is not just harmful, it's dangerous. This mindset shapes everything: where shelters get built, how policies are voted on, and whether a person sleeping outside is offered help or told to move. Public resistance, known as NIMBYism, not in my backyard, often kills housing projects before they even break ground. People support solutions in theory until they're asked to accept them in their own neighborhood. So instead of more shelters, we get more bans. Instead of compassion, we get crackdown. This fear-based thinking has allowed cities to justify harsh laws and neglect long-term solutions, all while pretending the issue is being handled. And it's not just political, it's personal. Many Texans simply tune out the crisis unless it touches them directly. They walk past encampments without making eye contact. They share social media rants but never volunteer. And while frustration is understandable, silence and indifference let the crisis grow unchecked. Until the public sees homelessness and crime not as someone else's problem, but as a reflection of our shared society, nothing will truly change. Real progress begins with empathy, with seeing the person behind the statistics, the story behind the struggle. If Texas wants a future where homelessness and street crime aren't daily headlines, it has to start with a shift in mindset. We need to stop turning away and start asking, what can I do? Because when the public starts caring, leaders start acting. And when communities stop judging and start helping, transformation becomes possible. After looking at all 10 reasons, one thing is clear: Texas is not just facing a homelessness or crime problem, it's facing a systems failure. From broken mental health care to housing shortages, drug addiction, wage inequality, and political paralysis, this crisis is not the result of one bad decision. It's the result of years of neglect, division, and missed opportunities. And now in 2025, the consequences are out in the open, spilling onto the streets, straining public services, and breaking down trust in leadership. This isn't just a big city issue. Whether you live in Houston or a small rural town, these challenges are spreading everywhere. The lack of shelter, treatment, safety, and dignity for thousands of Texans is a problem that affects businesses, schools, families, everyone. And the longer it goes unaddressed, the harder and more expensive it becomes to fix. The worst part: many of these problems have solutions. We know what works: housing first programs, coordinated care, living wages, smart law enforcement, and community-led planning. But what we're missing is the collective will to act. This is the real warning for Texas. If nothing changes, nothing improves. Homelessness will rise, crime will increase, trust in government will erode, and more people, innocent people, will pay the price for a system that looks away instead of stepping up. But if we start now with urgency, honesty, and unity, it's not too late to reverse course. It starts with leadership, but it continues with all of us, demanding better, voting smarter, showing compassion, and holding each other accountable. Because in the end, this isn't about politics, it's about people. It's about whether we choose to build a Texas that works for everyone, or only for those lucky enough to never fall through the cracks. The clock is ticking, and the choice is ours.